gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
So Hasan Piker, left-wing Twitch streamer, did an interview with Zohran Mamdani of New York. Zohran Mamdani is a Democratic Socialist candidate that is running for mayor of New York. So the New York primary is in June, where a candidate is going to be selected for the general election, and that person is probably going to be the next mayor. So right now, the main candidates are Zohran Mamdani, Eric Adams, and Andrew Cuomo has thrown his hat back in the race. He saw that Donald Trump was able to win the presidency with 34 felonies, and he said, well, maybe being an overt criminal and disgraced public official is not disqualifying in the way that maybe we previously thought it was in America. So Andrew Cuomo's running again. Eric Adams has decided to leave the Democratic Party and run as an independent, obviously because the Republican Party is the one that was able to put its finger on the scales in order to get Eric Adams out of the legal trouble that he was in, the corruption charges that he was under, in which it seems that there was some kind of deal made with Trump's DOJ that if Eric Adams would allow ICE thugs into New York and into places like Colombia to make arrests on behalf of Trump's deportation agenda, that they would overlook his corruption charges and vacate them or encourage them to be dropped, essentially. And so, I mean, in a way, Eric Adams is directly responsible for the deplorable attack on free speech that has happened in New York at Columbia University, where students are kidnapped and deported or fast-tracked for deportation with no basis at all. People who are legally in the country, people who have not broken any laws, and really they're not even accused of doing so. They're just accused of being involved in protests that the administration doesn't like. And this has happened other places than New York, but New York is really kind of the testing ground for it. And New York operates as a testing ground for many different policies that emanate not just to other places in America, but other places in the world. It is a great place to test how policies work because there's so many people there. There is a robust government there. There's a lot of problems there. There's obviously corruption there, like we see with Eric Adams and Andrew Cuomo. But it's places like that are a good place to test policies. And so that is kind of the substance of not just this interview, but Zohran Mamdani's his run for mayor in general, is that he's saying we should be trying policies that can help people's lives, policies that can materially make people's lives better, and policies that we already have evidence that work elsewhere. Because if we can make these policies work in New York, then that can be a blueprint for the direction that the country should go in general. And New York does act like that, for better or worse, whether it's stuff like stop and frisk, or there was a huge welfare rights struggle back several decades ago. And so Zohran is essentially saying that we need to push the policies of New York forward. We need to stop putting money in the pockets of cops to stand around in the subway and harass and shoot people and not really serve much purpose other than that. And so I'll go over some of the specifics of his campaign and like what I think one thing that I think he does well is he addresses the type of problems that are going to come up, not just running for mayor or trying to implement certain policies, but in being the mayor in general. And that's something that he brings up later in the interview, that it's a tough job and that he is not going to be isolated from the types of pressures and incentives that have corrupted New York mayors in the past, although his agenda would be much different and much more aggressively populist than any of those mayoral candidates. So Zohran represents an opportunity. in New York to take not just, local governance in a different direction, but to take the Democratic Party in a different direction, and to really have some solid data about policies that Americans already want, but might not necessarily trust, are going to work. And so those are the two hurdles that Zohran Mamdani faces as of right now. Is he has to, first of all, name recognition, where Eric Adams, Andrew Cuomo, these guys have already been the mayor, so they have much more name recognition. So for a lot of New Yorkers that aren't that interested in doing research about a socialist candidate, the race is essentially, at least the primary, is essentially between Cuomo and Eric Adams. And that's the other important thing to recognize, is that this primary is going to be decided by the most activated voters, just like any primary is, right? This is not the general mayoral election. And so there is a chance that Zohran could pull out this primary victory because the base that he's activating is a lot more excited, and they see new possibilities in Zohran. So there's a possible upside to it, but the idea of name recognition is still a big deal. And the other problem is, Zohran is kind of unabashed about being a democratic socialist and just socialist policies in general. And so a lot of these things, his approach is to identify policies that would be really substantial and practical and make a difference in the average person's life. But the problem is that when those policies are described, a lot of people just see it as socialism and kind of default to the reactionary list of justifications for why those policies can never work. And so the idea of socialism in general and the bias that a lot of people have against it is precisely what Zohran Mamdani is up against. Now, it's New York, so there's maybe a little bit more friendliness towards that in general than like maybe the general electorate. But it's still going to be a hurdle, because not everybody in New York is a socialist or is friendly to socialism. They might be a little bit more progressive, they might vote more progressive leaning, or just have generally more progressive politics. But still, the label socialism is one that we have a lot of work to do in terms of what it means to people and how it can actually positively benefit their lives. So I'm going to play all three clips that I have from this interview. These are from various parts of I think they sat down for like 4 hours. I don't know. So I'm not going to go through all that, but I have a couple particular clips that I think really get to the core of like what distinguishes his campaign and what is going to make it more difficult for him than the average candidate.
Because I feel like this is a major hurdle to clear for anyone that is even remotely to the left of, I guess, Donald Trump. When you talk about the government doing something, the government doing right by you, I feel like especially accelerated since the Reagan era, there's this attitude from the average American that like, there's not really anything that these guys are doing for us. Like, do you have an attitude? Is it just, show your work and hopefully people eventually believe that the subway stations are going to be clean and the buses are going to run on time?
I think you have to show your work. You have to actually deliver it, because the reason people don't believe in government is that they haven't seen it actually impact their lives in a positive way in a long time. And there's one recent example we have in congestion pricing, which was a program that was said to, once implemented, would decrease congestion, would increase bus speeds, would reduce emissions, would raise money for the MTA. And just at the point at which it was about to be implemented, it was at a very low level of popularity, which is the same thing that happened with similar schemes in Stockholm and London. But once it came into effect, you had people who were previously in opposition starting to support it because they could actually experience those tangible benefits. Now, I think that kind of program still needs to be paired with more immediate investments in public transit service, and that's what I've been fighting for in Albany as a state legislator.
So you don't want the bridge and tunnel crowd around these parts. That's what I'm getting. Eric, you want this?
Yeah.
I haven't used it.
We can come on. Socialism.
That's a scary word.
Socialism?
Yeah. So you're a socialist? What does that
Democratic
mean?
socialist, baby.
What does that mean?
First of all, I'm a member of New York City DSA. If that interests you, socialist.nyc/join. Second of all, I define it using the words of others of extending democracy from the ballot box to people's lives, of making sure that everybody has what they need to live a dignified life. And that may also now include Fearney Donuts.
Okay.
Mayor is often kneecapped, right? So if you're walking into this office, right, how do you build coalitions when you're coming in and you have strong opposition in terms of one of the most powerful forces in the city is the NYPD union, right? And we kind of saw what happened during de Blasio's time in office. He had a very tense relationship with them. I think it made promises that he made initially sort of disappear, right? So what kind of coalition are you trying to build as you walk in the door, and how do you grow that coalition?
No, it's a great question, and it speaks to our commitment to not just win the race, but to build a coalition that can govern. And it's easy to look at Eric Adams now and see him as a caricature of a Republican cop and forget how he ran in 2021. He ran in 2021 telling New Yorkers that they didn't have to choose between safety or justice. And there was a large constituency that voted for him that was interested in those questions of not having to choose those two things. And that means there's a constituency beyond just progressives who want to see a different approach to public safety in our city, one that foregrounds evidence-proven strategies that we've seen be successful elsewhere in the country. So I think there is that clear-eyed nature of it. The other thing I would say is being very direct with New Yorkers as to the message and the platform of this campaign. When I go to events, I typically start it off with asking people to finish the sentence as to what we're fighting for. We're running to freeze the rent, to make buses fast and free, to deliver universal childcare. And the reason I want them to know that is I also want them to hold me accountable to that from the very first day that I'm the mayor. Because that accountability, that relationship is one that we have to bring back to get people to actually believe in the possibility of local politics.
So he mentions a lot of important points here. I think the two main important ones are this idea of people's confidence in government and people's confidence in not just ostensibly populist, vaguely populist policies like insane tariffs, supposedly, but real socialist policies that can actually affect your life in a positive way. And the reality is that people in America, even in a city like New York, do not have a very positive view, at very least, of that label, socialism, and anything that can be associated with that label. People quickly revert to sort of, like I said before, reactionary thought processes about why those things can't work. And the propaganda to the effect that has laid that bedrock of, reactionary instinct in people has been very effective. So I would say that's his major hurdle, is to communicate these ideas, which are ideas that people really have a desire for already. And the example that he uses is congestion pricing, which was not popular at first. It wasn't polling popularly, but the implementation of it was so effective that it became a very popular program. In short, it worked, and it took the savings and the actual solution to the problem, it took it directly to the citizens, to the things that affect them most. And it turns out that relieving congestion in New York, even if it's even if there's fees and taxes on driving in certain places, which is effectively what congestion prices is, what it did is it made New York City more livable. And so people can see the benefit of that. And so you get that sort of reverse effect that you normally see with people's opposition to policies, where they say, oh, this thing that sounds more expensive actually is a really valuable policy. And if they were to get rid of it, that would be a big problem for me. And it encourages people to use the walkable resources of New York City, which is also where he says that he wants to make transit free. And he has plans for how he's going to pay for that. I think that appeals to the average New Yorker for sure, but it also might be a bit of a tough sell. And so Zohran's, essentially his goal is to convince people that with the implementation of these policies, whether this one works or that one works or whether they don't, he's going to be taking it directly to you, not just in terms of this policy that we're going to try that is aimed at improving your experience in New York City, but also hold me accountable. Hold me accountable for these policies and the fact that I said I'm going to do a certain thing, and so now I'm going to do it. And the fact that he is a DSA candidate is really important because it shows that like that is the theory on which he is trying to win this election. He's not trying to win it based on big money. He's not trying to win it based on appealing to the police or Wall Street, which is, kind of politics as usual. But he's trying to do it by going directly to the people. And so, again, I mean, it's a challenge for him. There's hurdles there, but there's also a lot of opportunity. And I think the Democrats need to recognize that this is a big opportunity for them. And really, the race, this primary race in New York, really represents the state of the Democratic Party, I think. You have this exciting candidate, Zohran, who has a lot of ideas. And, some of them are ideas that people find themselves a bit allergic to, except for the fact that a lot of the stuff that we've been doing other than that has not been working, and in fact has been absolute disasters. And so at some point we need to turn to the type of policies that Zohran is talking about. We just need to find the right communicator for those policies. So you have that possibility on one hand. Then you have Eric Adams, the current mayor, who is completely corrupt, beholden to Donald Trump's administration, has allowed for these, horrendous breaches of free speech and, the black sighting and kidnapping of students on his own watch. On his watch, he almost certainly directly allowed for these things to happen. And not only that, but he is literally corrupt even before that. The whole reason that even happened in the first place is to get him out of corruption charges and taking money from foreign governments in order for special favor in New York or whatever the hell was his reason for that. Just an incredibly corrupt mayor. And then you also have Andrew Cuomo, who is another incredibly corrupt mayor. Donald Trump himself has said that they get along quite well. He's accused of sexual harassment. He's accused of mishandling COVID so badly that many seniors in nursing homes were left to die, as well as a litany of his own corruption accusations as well, some of which got his own brother fired from CNN. So, I mean, if you can get fired from CNN for cavorting within the Democratic Party, you've got to be pretty particularly bad at it, I would think. So I think the Democrats' impulse in terms of the party at large is going to be to say, well, these candidates, Eric Adams and Andrew Cuomo, they're not ideal, but, we can't allow someone like Zohran Mamdani to get into power. We cannot allow people to think that Zohran Mamdani is a viable candidate, even though he is. This is the pattern of the Democratic Party. This is what they've done. It's what they do. They will only acquiesce to a leader like AOC or Bernie Sanders or Zohran Mamdani if they're forced to, if the election of that candidate forces them to recognize that this is not only someone who's in their party or who shares their voter base, but this is also somebody who is a leader of their party. And their desire to alienate people like that has basically led to a party where the only people they're left with is old, corrupt, incompetent, not up for the task, unpopular candidates, from Chuck Schumer to Andrew Cuomo and Eric Adams to Joe Biden himself, Kamala Harris. I mean, all of these promised leaders of the Democratic Party, people that are supposed to be the ones we can count on in moments like this, and the ones we can count on to not lose to Donald Trump in the first place. What they have delivered is sort of a dystopian hellscape where the people who are supposed to be fighting against fascism are either capitulating to fascism or, I don't know, playing in the grass or doing whatever the hell it is that they're doing other than their job. And again, a person like Zohran Mamdani, who's ideas focused and results focused and people focused, is an opportunity for there to be a real Democratic Party again. And this is essentially the thesis of democratic socialists, not so much to always run as Democrats, but that if more democratic socialist candidates throughout the country can get elected, then leadership can be taken over again, either from the Democratic Party or in the form of something that opposes the Democratic Party, that can deliver real results for people and become the strong and dominant populist party that Americans actually deserve, which Republicans have been allowed to cosplay as because of Democrats' refusal to embrace populism in any form. So here is another example for them to do that. And again, this isn't really about whether or not Democrats embrace him, Democrats as a party, but I think they should. And I think that him winning and having a successful mayoral tenure, would be, again, an opportunity for Democrats to recognize that some of these policies that he's talking about are not just popular on the face of it, but they could work. And they probably would work. And if we can make these things work in New York City, which they've already worked elsewhere, then we can make them work in even more places. And as for the problem with name recognition, I think what Zohran has already done very successfully is he has done like sort of man on the street reporting. He was first going viral, I think, a couple months ago because he was doing interviews with people New Yorkers who said they voted for Trump. And he asked them why. And a lot of them voted for AOC and Trump. And he asked them why. And so he was going directly to these people and he was talking to them about what it is about Donald Trump that has ultimately won them over. And you heard a lot of things about, he's not beholden to the same interests that other politicians are, and that he, he's a strong leader or whatever. I think ultimately what it is that he's just a good yapper. And so he won a lot of people over. That's all a politician is at the end of the day, is a professional yapper. And if you yap good enough, then people will give you the nuclear codes. So pretty good system we have going here. But what I think Zohran has going for him is that he's very likable, and he has that ability to sort of go viral. And the other thing that Hasan was doing in this interview is he was kind of pretending to be more adversarial towards Zohran than he was. They kind of joke around a little bit that him sitting down with Hasan is like easy fodder for people to use and attack ads against him, and I'm sure they will. But what Hasan was kind of jokingly doing is he was like sort of jokingly taking the right-wing angle. Like at one point he says, Zohran says we're going to attack the root causes of crime and we need to have like a more comprehensive approach to making sure that we're keeping people safe. And Hasan says, so we're bringing back stop and frisk. And what that does is it gives Zohran an opportunity to say, no, we're not bringing back stop and frisk. Or no, what you're saying is wrong because of this. Which just has a little bit of a different effect than if Hasan was saying, some people say this about your policies. You know what I mean? Even if he's just joking, and he's clearly just joking, it allows him to take on the oppositional perspective in the interview and shows Mamdani in that context rather than just the context where he's laughing and joking with somebody who agrees with him, which is what most of this interview is. But it also allows us to see him contending with some of the arguments that are often used against him or will continue to be used against him. And so I think that might be a good model for him going forward, because he has to solve this problem of name recognition. And I should also mention that New York is ranked choice voting. So that means that you not only can vote for Zohran as your first choice, but you also can put him as your second or third choice. So that makes your chances better, because it basically means that even somebody who is not the first choice on your particular ballot still has a better chance of winning, because if whoever you put first doesn't get enough votes to win, then your vote reverts to the second choice. So that is not only makes it easier for him to win if he gets put in as the second or third choice for a lot of people, but also what they're telling people is not to rank Andrew Cuomo. And that is because Andrew Cuomo has the most name recognition. So they're saying rank your choices, but leave Andrew Cuomo out of it, so that even if he's your third choice, he is still not going to get that additional vote that he would get. Essentially, it's just giving Andrew Cuomo as least of a chance to win as possible. So that is important to note here, is that you should rank Zohran Mamdani as your first choice, fill out your other choices, but do not rank Andrew Cuomo. That's an important important aspect of their campaign right now. But in terms of name recognition, I think that, something that the right-wingers have done very effectively is they have set up sort of contextual debates where they will genuinely be debating with somebody. It's not fake. But they have set up the situation so that they're in the advantage position, and they have spread their ideas that way. And so it's not just in the format of somebody speaking directly to an audience, which is effective if you feel like that's the person that you want to hear speaking to you. But it's this idea where somebody, whoever's in the disagreement position with Steven Crowder or Ben Shapiro, they are supposedly being represented in this video as well, but then you see the retort from Ben Shapiro and Steven Crowder. And so obviously those are set up in a way that is meant for them to have the dunk, which in terms of spreading your ideas, just as a commentator is pretty chicken shit. But I think as a candidate, it's kind of ideal, right? Putting yourself up against somebody who can make refutations of your arguments or who can be adversarial towards you, but also putting yourself in a position where the point of this content is to explain your ideas. And I think Zohran holds up really well in interviews. I think he's good with opposition and with chaotic energy. And that's part of one of the things that's really appealing about him. And so I think in the stretch up until the election, in my opinion, what he should focus on doing is going viral with as many moments like that as he possibly can. He should go on Jubilee, you know what I mean? Stuff like that, because I think he would hold up very well in that context. And I think that for him is the ideal way to show not only that he has good ideas, but that these good ideas hold up to scrutiny and they hold up against criticism. But if you want to support Zohran Mamdani, if you want to help with his campaign, they actually have already maxed out their donations for this primary campaign, which means they don't want you to send them any more money. So what you should do instead is you should volunteer, and I'll put up some information about how you can volunteer to Phone Bank. If you're outside of New York City, if you're inside New York City, you should go and try to figure out how you can help his campaign, how you can knock on doors for him. But yeah, to anybody outside of the city, organize events as well, or try to use whatever resources you can to make other people aware that they can also help this candidate. Because while New York City might be a far way away from where you are, like I said, it can be a breeding ground for some of these DSA policies that we want to see that can actually make people's lives better and show people not only that these ideas can work, but that there's a better way forward for America that is more working class centered and walkable cities centered, so that people can actually live comfortable and enjoyable lives in cities across the nation. So I think if we can give Zohran an opportunity to lead a positive example for that, we should all do everything we can.